50,000 orders in 27 minutes. Not for a phone, not for a gaming console, for a car, built by a company that had never bolted an axle together in its life. The Xiaomi SU7 launched on March 28, 2024. By the time most people in the West had seen the headline, the order book was already closed. 3 years earlier, the entire automotive industry had dismissed the idea as a vanity project by a smartphone brand with money to burn. Those same analysts are now watching Xiaomi deliver over 30,000 vehicles a month, after it outsold the Tesla Model 3 in China for the whole of 2025, 258,164 SU7s versus 200,361 Model 3s, in Tesla's own strongest market on Earth. In under 20 months from its first delivery, Xiaomi had 500,000 cars on the road. By 2026, the company is targeting 550,000 units for the year. The refreshed SU7 it launched in March of that year pulled 100,000 pre-orders in 15 days. This from a brand whose previous biggest product was a $400 phone. How did this happen? How did a company with no automotive heritage, no manufacturing experience, and no industry relationships walk into the most protected, capital-intensive business on Earth and immediately start winning? And what does it mean for the brands that spent a century building the walls Xiaomi just walked straight through? On March 30th, 2021, Lei Jun stood in front of a room in Beijing and made a promise that made the automotive world uncomfortable. Xiaomi would build an electric car. The company would commit $10 billion over the following decade, and he personally would stake his reputation as one of China's most respected entrepreneurs on the outcome. The reaction outside the room was less enthusiastic. Xiaomi had no crash testing facilities, no regulatory approvals, no automotive supply chain relationships, no engineers with car development experience on staff. The electric vehicle market in China was already one of the most saturated, most brutal competitive arenas in the world. BYD was moving hundreds of thousands of units. NEO, XPeng and Li Auto had already spent years burning capital to build credibility. Legacy international brands still commanded premium pricing and deep customer loyalty. Analysts were measured in their skepticism, at least publicly. In private, the consensus was blunt. A phone company building a car was not a strategy. It was an announcement. The gap between announcing a car and actually delivering one that competes was not a gap any smartphone brand had ever crossed. Apple had spent 10 years and reportedly $10 billion of its own money trying to crack the car business and had nothing to show for it. Lei Jun knew all of this. In his own words, the 3 years of development would be extremely difficult. He admitted the entry-level SU7 would be sold at a loss. He framed the whole project not as a business calculation, but as a mission to complete Xiaomi's human X-car X-home ecosystem loop. The car was always meant to be the final piece in a connected network of devices, all running Xiaomi's operating system. Nobody believed him. That was about to become a very expensive mistake for the people who did not. The dismissal was not subtle, and it came from the top. When Xiaomi confirmed its entry into the EV market, the response from legacy automakers landed somewhere between amusement and indifference. Volkswagen and BMW had been building cars for over a century. Porsche had survived world wars, oil crises, and the transition to digital dashboards. The idea that a brand known for smartphones and budget appliances would produce a vehicle capable of competing at the premium end of the market was not something the industry took time to seriously model. Tesla took a similar posture. By 2021, Tesla had already normalized the idea of a tech company building cars. The Model 3 had become the top-selling premium sedan in China. The Model S was still the benchmark for electric performance. Tesla's strategic response to Xiaomi through 2022 and 2023 showed a company focused on its own margin defense, not on any incoming threat from a consumer electronics brand. The blind spot was the software revolution sitting directly in front of them. Legacy automakers had spent decades perfecting mechanical complexity. What they had not done was master the operating system beneath it. In-car software was an afterthought, outsourced, updated on a 4-year development cycle, and barely integrated with the devices their customers actually lived on. The car was still understood as a mechanical product with a screen bolted in, and that assumption was about to make the entire industry look architecturally obsolete. If you are new here and this is the kind of analysis that earns a subscription, now is the moment. Hit the button. The next chapter is where the actual strategy gets interesting. Subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. The next chapter is where Xiaomi's real weapon gets revealed. The legacy brands thought they were watching a tech company attempt to build a car. What Xiaomi was actually building was something they had no category for. And by the time they understood what it was, the orders were already pouring in. The insight that drove the entire SU7 project was this. Xiaomi could not win a 100-year war on mechanical engineering. They were entering the fight too late, but they did not need to win that war. What Xiaomi understood, and what the legacy brands could not yet accept, was that the car's centre of gravity had already shifted. The most important component of a new vehicle for a Chinese buyer under 40 was no longer the engine. It was the operating system. It was the ability to make a call, adjust cabin temperature, check the route, and stream music. All from a single ecosystem that already ran on the phone in their pocket, the screen on their kitchen counter, and the television in their living room. Xiaomi had 20 million active device users in China at the time of its EV announcement. That was not a customer base it needed to acquire. It was a customer base it needed to connect. The company treated the car not as a standalone product but as a node in a wider network of devices all running Xiaomi's HyperOS. The SU7 synced natively with Xiaomi phones, smart home systems and tablets, not through a third-party integration but through architecture designed from the ground up to work together. This was not a feature list. It was a Trojan horse. While traditional brands were debating horsepower ratings and leather options, Xiaomi had quietly redefined what a premium car was supposed to feel like to the generation of buyers who would dominate the market for the next 20 years. The car became the product. The ecosystem became the reason to buy it. And no legacy brand on Earth was positioned to replicate that within any meaningful competitive timeframe. Building a smart car was only half the problem. The other half was building 50,000 of them a month without collapsing under the weight of it. Xiaomi announced its Beijing factory in November 2021. The same year it announced the car. What followed was a construction and ramp-up story. The European automotive press quietly stopped making jokes about once the delivery numbers started arriving. The facility was fully automated from the beginning. More than 700 robots operate inside the plant. In the body shop alone, 381 robots work alongside just 20 human employees, assembling parts to the car frame in under 30 seconds. Xiaomi claims this is roughly twice as fast as traditional manufacturing. The factory builds one new SU7 every 76 seconds. The supply chain was assembled at a speed that would have been administratively impossible in Germany or the United States. Xiaomi leveraged China's existing battery and motor manufacturing network, much of it already servicing BYD, NIO, and CATL at scale. The 101 kWh battery in the SU7 Max came from CATL's Keelan platform. The electric motors were sourced from established Chinese suppliers with proven production records. The semiconductor and sensor stack drew from the same ecosystem feeding China's broader consumer electronics industry. The resulting timeline was the kind of number that requires a second look. From public announcement to production-ready vehicle, 32 months. From first delivery to 100,000 units on the road, 230 days. From first delivery to 500,000 cumulative units, under 20 months. Traditional automakers take 5 to 7 years to develop a new platform from scratch. Xiaomi did it in under 3, and the car it produced at the end of that timeline was not a compromise. 3 years of development, a factory assembled from nothing, a supply chain built at smartphone speed, but a car still has to prove itself on the road. And what happened when the SU7 got there left automotive journalists writing sentences they had never expected to write. March 28, 2024, Beijing. Lei Jun took the stage for a 2-hour presentation that the automotive press had not entirely prepared itself for. The design team behind the SU7 included Sawyer Lee, poached from BMW where he had led work on the iX, and James Q, who worked on the Mercedes-Benz Vision EQXX, one of the most celebrated concept vehicles of the last decade. Chris Bangle, the designer widely credited with transforming BMW's visual identity in the early 2000s, served as a design consultant. The result looked nothing like a budget product. The proportions were long and low, drawing immediate comparisons to the Porsche Panamera. The 0.195 drag coefficient put it among the most aerodynamically efficient production sedans ever built. Beneath the body, the numbers were harder to argue with. The standard SU7 offered 700 kilometers of range on the Chinese CLTC test cycle, beating the Tesla Model 3's 634 kilometers. The SU7 Max launched with a 101 kilowatt-hour XAT Keeling battery, 800-volt fast charging capable of adding 242 miles in 10 minutes, and a 0 to 100 km per hour time of 2.78 seconds. The proprietary V6 electric motor was developed in-house rather than sourced off the shelf. Then came the price, the standard SU7 at 215,900 yuan, approximately $30,000, below the Tesla Model 3's 235,500 yuan entry price, and at a fraction of any comparable European luxury EV. Within 4 minutes, 10,000 orders had been placed. Within 7 minutes, 20,000. By the 27-minute mark, the order count had cleared 50,000. The waitlist stretched to 7 months. And the conversation inside every major automotive boardroom shifted in a direction it had not shifted before. Performance comparisons in the EV market are common. What made Xiaomi stand apart was specificity, because the margins were not close. The SU7 Max at $42,000 ran 0 to 100 km per hour in 2.78 seconds. The Tesla Model S, at more than double the price in comparable markets, managed the same sprint in 3.1 seconds. The SU7's 800 km CLTC range compared favourably to the Model S, even after discounting for the more generous Chinese test methodology. At the circuit level, the YU7 posted faster lap times than both the Porsche Taycan Turbo S and Tesla Model S Plaid at the Zhejiang International Circuit under standard factory settings. The SU7 Ultra launched in February 2025 at 529,900 yuan, approximately $75,000, delivered 1,548 horsepower from 3 motors and a 0 to 100 km per hour time of 1.98 seconds. On June 11, 2025, it set a new Nürburgring Nordschleife production EV lap record with a time of 7 minutes and 4.957 seconds, nearly 3 seconds faster than the Porsche Taycan Turbo GT with the YSAC package, and faster than the Rimac Nevera, which had been considered one of the fastest production EVs ever built. Ferrari reportedly purchased an SU7 Ultra to benchmark against its own first electric vehicle in development. Porsche responded by developing a new Manthey racing package, specifically to recapture the record, which it did in May 2026. The back and forth between two of the world's most celebrated performance brands over a lap time at Nürburgring tells you something about how seriously the industry now takes Xiaomi. The question that had been forming since March 2021, whether a phone brand could actually build a competitive car, had its answer. The SU7 was faster, better equipped, longer range, there was one lever left, and Xiaomi pulled it with a precision that made the competition look genuinely helpless. Lei Jun admitted it publicly. The entry-level SU7 was being sold at a loss. The base model launched at 215,900 yuan, approximately $30,000. A comparable Porsche Taycan at the time started above $90,000 in the same market. The Tesla Model 3 was priced at 235,500 yuan in China. Xiaomi's SU7 came in below Tesla and still offered more range and faster acceleration. This was not accidental. The pricing was designed to immediately colonize the premium segment before legacy brands could mount a coherent response. The loss on each base unit was, in practice, a customer acquisition cost. Buyers who paid $30,000 for a Xiaomi sedan were not just buying a car. They were entering an ecosystem. Future software subscriptions, charging infrastructure, over-the-air upgrades and accessory sales would all flow through the same platform. The long-term economics were not calculated per vehicle. They were calculated per customer across a lifetime relationship. The immediate market impact was severe. European luxury EV brands found themselves competing on specifications and losing, then competing on price and losing worse. Porsche's China business, once its fastest-growing region globally, began deteriorating sharply. By 2025, Porsche was publicly acknowledging structural challenges in the Chinese market, with profits in that region declining faster than any other geography. The 2026 SU7 update raised the base price slightly to 229,900 yuan, reflecting genuine hardware upgrades across the entire lineup, including standard LiDAR on every trim, 700 TOPS of AI computing power, and a Pro model now offering 902 kilometers of range. 100,000 pre-orders arrived in 15 days. The modest price adjustment changed nothing about the competitive picture. The numbers explain the sales. The behavior explains the shift. The buyer profile for the Xiaomi SU7 in China is consistent across the market data. Young, educated, household income in the top quartile, and specifically choosing Xiaomi over alternatives they could easily afford. These are not budget-constrained buyers defaulting to the cheapest option. Many of them previously drove BMWs, Audis, and Porsche Cayennes. They are trading down in brand heritage and trading up in every metric they actually use on a daily basis. What is driving that decision is not a performance spec sheet. It is the experience of sitting inside a car where the software feels native to the phone in their pocket because it was engineered to be. The average Chinese EV buyer in the premium segment spends roughly 90 minutes a day inside the car. In that time, the thing they interact with most is not the steering wheel. It is the screen, the voice assistant, the navigation, and the seamless link between their car and everything else running on their Xiaomi ecosystem. A car that cannot run a native app ecosystem, that cannot update itself overnight, that requires a dealership visit to change a software setting, is not a premium product to a buyer under 40. It registers as a broken product. And that recategorization is not a trend. It is permanent. By the end of 2025, the SU7 had outsold the Tesla Model 3 in China, 258,164 units against 200,361. Xiaomi's second vehicle, the YU7 SUV, pulled over 200,000 firm orders in 3 minutes at its launch in June 2025. The consumer verdict was not ambiguous. 500,000 cars, a software ecosystem that legacy brands cannot replicate on any timeline that matters. A buyer who has permanently changed what premium means. What comes next is not a prediction. It is already here. The era of the mechanical car is not ending, it has already ended. What Xiaomi proved between 2021 and 2026 is that the industry's deepest assumption, that manufacturing heritage and brand legacy were permanent competitive advantages, was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Wrong in a way that reveals a complete misreading of where the value in a modern vehicle actually lives. The hardware can be sourced, the supply chain can be assembled, the factory can be built in under 3 years. What cannot be replicated quickly is a software ecosystem with 20 million existing users, an AI platform that improves with every over-the-air update, and a brand that the target buyer has trusted since their first smartphone. Xiaomi closed 2025 with 411,837 vehicles delivered, a 200.9% increase year over year, finishing well above its own revised target of 400,000 units. It has set a 550,000 unit target for 2026 and is launching 4 new models this year, including the SU7L Executive Edition, a long-wheelbase sedan designed to compete with the Porsche Panamera Executive, and the YU8 and YU9 extended-range SUVs. The 2026 SU7 brought over 100 hardware and software upgrades in a 2-year cycle, operating on a refresh cadence that mirrors consumer electronics rather than traditional automotive development. That rhythm alone keeps Xiaomi ahead of any competitor still running on a 4-year model cycle. Legacy automakers are not standing still, but the software capability gap and the speed of iteration required to close it are not converging at the pace the market demands. The brands that survive this decade will be the ones that accepted the new terms of competition before their margins enforced the lesson. Xiaomi did not build a car company. It built the operating system for the next generation of personal transportation. And it did it in 3 years, starting from nothing, in an industry that was certain that was impossible. If this changed how you think about the global EV race, share it with someone still treating this as a story about cars. Subscribe for the next video, it is already coming.